welcome to the second episode of Bosses on Internet. I'm your host Hardik Vaidya. Joining me today is someone really special. This individual runs Western India's leading multi-chain diagnostics laboratories or centers. Well, please join me in welcoming the Managing Director of Suburban Diagnostics, Dr. Sanjay Arora. Welcome to the show Bosses on Internet, sir. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for being here, Hardik. Thank you for doing this.
And many congratulations on the 25-year-long phenomenal journey. Now, I would love to know where, how, when did this all begin?
It's when you reflect back, 25 years is actually a long time, but also you think that it's just gone by very soon. Actually, I never wanted to be a medical professional. I was always interested in engineering or sports.
Okay.
But I guess being, as my kids call me, the nerdy student, I had the marks to get into both engineering and medicine. And I walked into both VGTI and Grand Medical College. So then I had to choose one. So I guess my family felt that, we don't have a doctor in the family. So
really? So you were the chosen one?
So I was the chosen one. And that's how my journey started in the healthcare area. And even for post-graduation, my sort of interest was more towards the surgical branches. But then somehow my friends convinced me that, pathology is a good opportunity for you. So why don't you think of pathology? And first it was family and then it was friends. And that's how I chose pathology. And once I chose pathology, I knew that, that I don't want to work for someone.
Okay.
And that sort of was a learning which I got from my father. He had started his career in a job and then went on to become an entrepreneur late in his life. And I guess that aspect of entrepreneurship that he went through rubbed off on me, and then his guidance and wisdom sort of made me realize that there is something which we can do all by ourselves. So Anju, my wife, and I started Suburban Diagnostics in July 1994. And in this July, we complete 25 years of that journey.
Tell me more about when you started off Suburban. Did you start off as a solo entrepreneur or you had a co-founder with you?
So, like I said, my wife and I started this company together. She is not a medico. She's from the finance background. So that worked out really well.
I'm sure it did.
We raised a loan, so she would help in that. And because she's from the commerce background, she comes from a business background. I don't come from a business background. My father has been, in a...
It's such a healthy complementary skill set match here.
Yeah. And so that helped a lot. And, I was doing the medical side of the business, right, and she was looking into the non-medical side. And that's how it sort of, continues even till today. And Anju is sort of the anchor in my life. She's the exact, I would say, not opposite, but complements me, as you said, very well. That, she keeps me grounded. I'm a short-tempered, flamboyant, speaks my mind, wears my heart on my sleeve.
Right.
But she's a lot more measured,
right,
composed. So when people don't want to talk to me, they go and talk to her. So she becomes a sounding board for many people in the organization also. And even in my family, my father wants to talk to me, but he'll talk via my wife.
Really?
Yeah.
And why is that?
She listens. I react. So
Okay.
That's the reason.
And I mention this particularly because I think while you get all the limelight, there is a huge anchor that you mentioned in your wife, without whom this journey would have been impossible.
Absolutely. She's, I've not been to a bank in the last 25 years.
No way.
I've never needed to go to a bank. I've never used an ATM. I've never done any of those things because she's always taken care of that. So she literally, we've been married for 28 years and she literally, pampered me to where I am today. So when we completed 25 years of our marriage, normally you wear your wedding ring on your left ring finger. So I shifted it to my right ring finger to say that the first 25 years you gave yourself selflessly to me. It's now my turn for the next 25 years. So I'll shift the wedding ring to the right side so that I can give back for the next 25 years. So that's my ambition or motto, is to give back to what she has done for me in the first 25.
Wow. Why did the name Suburban come up though? What's the story behind Suburban?
So actually, I was very clear that I didn't want it to be Dr. Arora's lab.
Okay.
That was something very clear. But I always knew that it can't be just a person behind the scene. So that's how we wanted to not call it that. So we knew we didn't want to call it, and we had a consultant with whom we had worked who had helped us design the whole infrastructure and equipment and other things.
Right in those early days?
Early days, yes. A friend of mine who already had a lab had bought equipment from this gentleman. So he recommended this name, and then we got together and we set up. So initial processes and systems. So so we were just sitting one day on the table and thinking what name, and then Andheri being a suburb, so we just came up with Suburban Diagnostics. And at that time, there was a huge opportunity because healthcare was still not, professionalized the way it is today.
And I believe very fragmented too back then.
Extremely fragmented. Most diagnostic services were largely hospital-based. So non-hospital-based diagnostic services were far and few, and there was no concept of standardization. But yet there was so much change happening in all the environment around us. Malls were coming up, multiplexes were coming up. The banks were becoming more, international. The kind of cars, the clothes, everything. There was so much change everywhere. So I said, why not change the healthcare ecosystem as well? And that was the opportunity really. The other opportunity which I saw was that, how do you change the perception of a patient from not being a patient but being a customer? So give that little customer centricity to somebody who comes to us. And the last opportunity that I saw was that, how do you choose healthcare? You have your ability to choose everything else in life, but how do you choose healthcare? So unless you maintain that level of standardization and transparency and communication, so people then actually have the right to choose their own healthcare. It's not forced upon them. So these were the opportunities that I saw at that time. And that is why we came up with Suburban Diagnostics. We had a tagline, and we tried to create it into a corporate entity which did not belong to an individual or to a family.
And when you say that you wanted to not keep Dr. Arora's labs and stuff like that, were you always say you want to have a scalable model, massive reach, lots of impact?
Actually, I think that was not the thought initially. As things sometimes just happen in your life as has happened in mine.
Clearly.
What I learned from somebody is that in life you have, there is x-axis where there is credibility, and on y-axis there is visibility. So I guess the first 10 years I just built credibility. And only once I had established that credibility could I build on the visibility. So I didn't want to, build visibility without having any credibility. So the first 10 years from 1994 to 2004 is what I did, is just build my own credibility as a pathologist, as an entrepreneur. I had never run an enterprise myself. Anju had run a very small data entry business, but not really of this scale. So every day was a learning for us. So this learning that I want to share is about opening a shutter. So every morning I would reach at 6:45, and I had to open the shutter because then the housekeeping guy would come and do the cleaning, and then I would set up the lab for the first patient to come in by 7:30. Every day I would open the shutter and every day I would put the shutter down.
Right.
And I realized that this opening and shutting the shutter is giving me so many valuable lessons. The first valuable lesson that I learned is a sense of ownership. That I have the keys in my hand. That if I lose these keys, nothing will happen. Sense of ownership, sense of responsibility. The second thing it taught me was punctuality. That if I don't reach on time, nothing else will happen. So you have to be there on time. The third thing it taught me was humility. That you have to bend down to lift a shutter up. So you stay grounded, bend down to this bigger force, and begin your day on a fresh note. The next thing that I learned was fitness. That it's not very easy to open a shutter. If you have tried, I don't know.
I have.
But you need to be fit to open a shutter.
Absolutely.
So it taught me that if I have to look after something, I have to first look after myself. So it taught me to be fit. It taught me maintenance. That if you don't maintain your shutter well, if you don't lubricate it well, it's not so easy to open the shutter. But if you maintain it well, it's much easier. It taught me teamwork, that if after I come there, I have to make sure that the next person comes, the next person comes. So how do you collaborate and create that teamwork? it taught me a backup plan. That in case if I am not able to reach on time, I need to make sure that somebody else is there to open the shutter. So, how do I make sure that the key is with somebody else who I can trust, to open the shutter? It taught me communication. And if the shutter is down and somebody wants to reach out to me, I still have a message painted on the shutter that if you want to reach us in an emergency, please call us on this number. So these were the learnings that I got every day by opening the shutter. And every time now I give a talk, this becomes a favorite part of my talk, which everybody appreciates, that just by opening a shutter every day,
There is
there's so
many
much of
learnings.
valuable lessons of life.
I want to quickly understand, what's the impact of Suburban so far? In the 25-year-long journey, what are the numbers, metrics that you've hit so far?
So like I said, in the first 10 years, we were just one lab. In 2004, again, my father plays that instrumental role. He said, so we had identified, a friend of mine said that Thakur village is this upcoming, suburb. And so my father and his friend went to, Thakur village.
This is after the 10 years.
This is after 10 years, in 2003. And then he just calls me from there, okay, I've seen this row house. It's a perfect place. We should now open a diagnostic center. So I've gone ahead and purchased it. So we purchased this in December 2003, and in May 2004 we started our first comprehensive diagnostic center. The success of running that diagnostic center in Kandivali and our lab at Andheri gave us the belief that now this model can be scalable. So 2004 onwards, every year we added one new location. So in 2004 to 2012, we moved from one location to about 12 locations. In 1 year, we added maybe a couple of collection centers, and in 2012, instead of one, we added 2 larger locations. Then in end of 2012, a friend of mine who also grew up with me is an investment banker, and we would travel to Andheri station by bus, and we would have these interesting conversations. Would always tell me that, whenever you need capital, take private equity the last, because that's the most expensive form of capital. So we initially took only debt, but beyond a point of time when you need to scale up rapidly, you need to have private equity. And then we appointed us, a boutique investment bank who then helped us get private equity, and that's how Sequoia Capital came on board towards the fag end of 2012. So in 2013 onwards, from about 15 locations, today we are at more than 150 locations across Western India. From Anju and me, who were 2 of us, to about 100 people, 150 odd people, to now we are more than 1,000 people that work with us. We would be very happy when we would celebrate that today we, service 10 patients in a day.
Wow. From there to this.
And today, if we get maybe even sometimes on a Saturdays, we go between 4,500 to 5,000 patients, we feel that, okay, we have just scratched the surface and there's so much more to do.
Clearly.
So, so that's been the journey so far, that if we are able to impact multiple lives at different stages, that for me is the biggest sort of measure of success, as I call it. Being able to add value to a patient or to a doctor. That for me is my measure of success.
But this obviously is huge, right? Where you've reached from your humble beginnings, this is such a massive, massive change in the whole journey. But I would love to know, the early days. What are the early days like? How were you going about going patient to patient? How was people coming to you? What was it like, the initial days?
So I remember initial days were, I would get to read the newspaper a lot because I had that much time, because,
of course,
it's early days, you don't get too many patients. And then I was told that you're not going to get patients until you go around and start meeting doctors. So every evening then I would leave the clinic and I would go and meet doctors and build familiarity with them. And, one doctor would help another, and then that's how sort of the word of mouth spread. And then, I would, get back to them on the reports that we generated for their patients and building a rapport with them. In between, one large corporate lab opened up their big lab inside Lokhandwala complex, which was a drainage area for us. But we were not able to afford the rentals of Lokhandwala, so we were outside Lokhandwala. But I was feeling extremely threatened that this corporate lab is going to take over our business because they are coming into the hub of our drainage area. So that, in adversity, you get an opportunity. So we decided that instead of people coming to us, we will go to them. And that's how this whole concept of home visits came about, where I would come every morning at 7:30 and my team would prepare a small visit bag. And then I would go door to door, maybe 4 or 5 houses every day and collect blood samples. That initial, rounds of doing home visits for multiple years today has become our biggest growth channel, where we have a team of about 60 technicians doing about 600 home visits every day. And that's become one of our separate business verticals. So, sometimes, you just think out of the box in terms of adversity, and it gives you your biggest growth opportunity. And that's been so every small challenge, you try and convert it into an opportunity for yourself.
That's how an entrepreneur thinks, right? Like maybe every adversity you want to convert it into an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And tell me more about when you were able to figure that you are scaling rapidly, and which is, I believe, in 2012. Was it difficult to handle the amount of success that was coming your way?
So I think what was difficult was building a team, that could handle the scale at which we wanted to grow. So I think what we did is probably we grew too fast too soon initially, and we didn't have the bandwidth in terms of capability to manage that. So I think over the last 3-4 years we've been able to balance that, and now we have a truly professional corporate team. All functions are managed by a professional, but because I have done everything by my own hands for the last so many years, I'm still able to add value to them. So the biggest challenge that I saw was, because we are so people dependent in our industry, being a service industry.
Certainly.
People becomes our biggest asset, and also sometimes the biggest challenge. So building the right team, creating the right culture, and mentoring people on the core values of the organization, that sort of becomes the biggest opportunity or the challenge for you as well.